Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. It is your Friday recap time, and joining me today to talk about the big news of the week, we have Debbie Soon and Randi Zuckerberg, co-founders of Hug, which is a Web3 Etsy for art. We get more into really what Hug is and they break it down. I love this platform. It's been really cool to see how it's evolved from when they first launched it. Randi came on the podcast many months ago to talk about its initial iteration and the initial plan for Hug. And then it's really grown and evolved in super interesting ways that we talk about at the end of this episode. But we cover all sorts of other fun stuff too. So we talk about the market right now broadly, what's happening in the NFT space, sort of a vibe check, if you will. We talk about the Balaji news. I have been obsessed with everything Balaji is saying and the response to Balaji. And so I really dive into all of that. We also talk about the moment that blockchain gaming is having. And I was at GDC, the Game Developers Conference, earlier this week to moderate a conversation between Ryan Wyatt of Polygon and Robbie Ferguson of Immutable to talk about the partnership that they are entering into. So we talk about that, and we talk about Arbitrum, the airdrop, which happened today. I am recording this on Thursday, March 23rd. So really diving into so much good stuff. I will say I sprung some of this on Randi and Debbie. We gave them a bit of a heads up on some of the topics, but I ended up switching around some of the topics we were going to talk about today. So they did not have time to fully prep all of these subject matters, but I think they have so many valuable insights to contribute just as founders in this space. Debbie does a lot of work with creators and talking about creator royalties and what's happening in the artist space. So we talk about AI art with her. Randi was very early at Facebook and can draw the comparisons between what's happening right now in Web3 and what happened in the early days of tech in ways that I think are so valuable and frankly reassuring during these times. It was such a joy and an honor to have them both on the podcast today. And with that, we need to hear a word from our lovely sponsors and then on to the show. I am so excited to announce that this year, Overpriced JPEGs has partnered with OPENSEA, the world's leading NFT marketplace, built for everyone, creators, collectors, noobs, and experts alike. I'm an OPENSEA user because they have the best selection of NFTs and a truly inclusive view of the ecosystem, supporting 8 chains and 8 global languages. I trust the systems they've put in place to keep the space safe, like copyright protection, malicious URL detection and removal, robust verification, and more. It's why they are the place to buy, sell, and create NFTs. That's right. You know OPENSEA, you use OPENSEA, but did you know that OPENSEA now has drops? New exclusive projects launch every week from top projects and creators, and you can check them out now using the link in the show notes. They also recently introduced self-serve drops, which is in beta, and allows creators to launch their projects right on OPENSEA. This drops product gives creators access to tools like rich storytelling drop pages, multi-chain support, and drop mechanic customization. The full launch for self-serve drops is coming this spring. So check out the upcoming drops on OPENSEA right now using the link in the show notes and own what moves you. You'll also be supporting the show in the process. Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about, Web3 Sense. A Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but Web3 Sense has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise Web3 Sense has data that you want to see with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what Web3 Sense can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it. Randi, Debbie, welcome to Overpriced JPEGs.
Yay! Yay! Thanks for having us.
Let's start where we always start on the show, which is just like market vibe check for y'all. How are you feeling these days? Debbie, you're at NFT LA. I'd be curious about the vibes at NFT LA. What are y'all seeing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's been a tough year for every single one of us, but I feel like the people that are still here are the people that are really intentional and really building real stuff and are not just here for money grabs. Definitely at NFTLA, it feels a little less exuberant as it did last year. Last year definitely felt a little glitzier. This year felt a little bit more like there were breakout panels, a lot more casual. And obviously there's still a bunch of side events, but I've also been noticing a lot more like art focused side events. Like I went to a really fun art event a couple of days ago where it was just like live painting and live minting and just really, really laid back. So less of those kind of rages, Steve Aoki, I don't know, like none of those, it feels like this year. But yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, it's been a tough year for everyone. We still see artists creating. We'll still see the real, genuine builders with a real vision and for the space continuing to create here.
Is there AI speak happening at NFTLA? Like, or is that like a part of the conversation?
Yeah, I think it's definitely been coming up in the conversation. Obviously, we've got GPT-4 that just got released last week. I know Midjourney version 5 was out last week. So definitely a lot of people experimenting. I think everybody's still trying to figure out how to fit AI into their flow and make it really work for them. But it's definitely something that's been coming up, at least from what I've been seeing.
Randi, how are you feeling these days?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I've been down this road before. There was a similar ebb and flow at the start of Web 2. Like I remember the first mobile apps that came out on the iPhone were like a fake beer drinking app where you pretended to drink it and the picture went down. And then like the other one was the Zippo lighter app that was literally just a picture of a lighter. And like at the beginning, everyone was like, yeah, we need to make a mobile app. And then like all of those came out and everyone was like, mobile apps are stupid. Everyone went away from them. Like no brands created mobile apps for a few years. And now like you wouldn't dream of running a company, and so many companies are entirely mobile. So there is a life cycle to all of this. And unfortunately, we are in the Zippo lighter app phase of Web where, there was just like this kind of glut of things that were put out there that didn't really make anyone's lives better or serve a purpose. And so we're now backing away from that. But my expectation is that in a year or two, we'll actually see really game-changing use for this. I think the other thing is like there's a reason that startups don't go public right away, because you need to be able to experiment and not have every little decision affect a stock price. And I think, unfortunately, what we saw with Web3 is that startups were running like public companies where every decision they made, every communication from the founders had an immediate impact on a floor price. Yeah. And it is not healthy to run a startup that way. There's a reason that startups have been running since the dawn of time not that way. And so I think that that's really a wake-up call for people in the industry.
It's such an important point. I'm curious on your comparison to Web 2, which, are the early days of like mobile apps, which obviously we've heard before. And I think, those of us who weren't in the internet in that era, like take solace in the fact that this has happened before. Sorry, Debbie, I muted you because we were getting some background noise. So just unmute if you want to say something. Sorry.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, are we not old enough?
Yeah.
You guys are too young. So take joy in that.
What's so funny to me is you have so many people. I mean, I was listening to Kara Swisher's podcast this morning, and, she's saying, well, crypto didn't work out. And, essentially crypto is dead. And you hear this all the time, obviously, from call it mainstream figures. But it's so weird because you hear it from mainstream figures who have themselves covered and seen these life cycles. Yeah. And I'm curious, like, what your take is, Randi, on like why you have so many people who have seen this happen so many times before in tech, like, still just thinking that Web3 is totally dead and done for.
Yeah, I think that it gets headlines to say that is the real answer. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in the last 20 years I saw the headlines, Facebook is dead, Twitter is dead, like so many, thousands of times. Every time a new company would launch or a new product, it would be like, this is the Twitter killer. And then, like, shockingly, Twitter was still around. So I've sort of learned to take sensationalist titles like that as a grain of salt. And, I love Kara Swisher. She's an incredible journalist, but she is a sensationalist one. She does say things to get attention. And so it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, she's a content creator at the end of the day. Yeah. It's just funny because it'll be like a casual thing in passing, where you're like, you're not even getting... I don't think anybody's doing a write-up on this, but I mean, look, I'm certainly with y'all, and I'm excited for this to pop back into view so we can be like, hey, it wasn't dead, as it turns out.
Totally. But maybe in some ways she or other people are right. Like the current incarnation might be dead, which is fine. We're constantly evolving. Tech is always evolving and disrupting itself. I think a lot of the things that we saw in Web3 needed to go away. So, but I don't think that you can write off an entire industry because of a few projects are suffering.
And we all see how much activity is still happening. I mean, if this is the doldrums of the bear, think of all the stuff that is still occurring. But talking about this moment in particular, this past week, I think it's interesting because we've been in this almost bull market within a bear for a little while, really spurred on by Blur. You had, whether you want to call it airdrop farming or, whatever the, wash trading, whatever you want to call it, right? Like where basically you had all of this activity drummed up by the incentive that Blur put out. And so it gave this feeling of like kind of being back in a bull market. There was activity, prices were pumping, activity was high. And that has stopped, I think, really when Silvergate happened, Silicon Valley Bank happened. Obviously, there was some nervousness there. But really, on the back of that, you saw crypto start pumping. And we know that when crypto prices pump, that actually doesn't tend to be good for NFTs. People tend to stop trading NFTs and just hold their crypto or do whatever they're doing on the crypto side. And so we've seen that. We've seen Bitcoin pumping tremendously. We're going to talk about the Balaji thing briefly here because I think it's really fascinating. Obviously, we're seeing ETH prices have been pumping. They're down a little bit today as we record this on Thursday. Came down like $1,000 or whatever from their high. But it's definitely put like a hush, it feels like, over the NFT markets. And specifically with some of these big projects, you've seen Moonbirds and CloneX now are both below mint price. I don't know right as we're recording this, but I know they at least hit below mint price, their respective mint prices, for the first time, I think ever. I think for Moonbirds, certainly ever. I haven't followed CloneX quite as closely, but I imagine it's like ever. Doodles has had a kind of ugly week with some, I don't know, call it controversy, I suppose, with Poopy, one of the founders, saying that they're no longer an NFT project. So it feels like there's a little bit of a hush. The thing that I find, I guess, most bearish, because prices are going to come and go, and I think the Poopy stuff is overblown, but is that you have like unique buyers, like the number of people who are actually on a daily basis buying and trading NFTs hit like close, at least a local all-time low this past week. So you just aren't having that activity. Yeah. What do y'all make of this? Debbie, I think you had a post about the NFT project, the Poopies NFT project comment. Curious to get your guys' thoughts on all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the term NFT project never really set quite well with me. And I know it's semantic, so the haters would be like, it's just a word. But I always felt that the word project meant that something was a one-time endeavor or something that was really like, short-term in nature. And the fact of the matter is that everyone that starts a quote-unquote NFT project are really building businesses. So, his exact quote of, Doodles is no longer an NFT project, I kind of relate to. I think obviously a lot of the controversy is around how, it sounded like he was turning his back on the community. And obviously everybody's really quick to judge. And I think for us too, building in public, you always have your first 10, first 100, first 1,000 followers or supporters. And my personal take is that it's obviously really important to take care of those people since they believed in you when all you had was really a vision and a pipe dream. That's what you're trying to sell when you start kind of launching something in this space. So I understand the frustration. But at the same time, in some ways it doesn't surprise me because, and we talked about floor prices moving and everything, because at the end of the day, how do you really value an NFT project? Like, how is the floor price indicative of the value? Like, I always find it so fascinating when somebody says, oh, Moonbirds or a Bored Ape or CryptoPunk is undervalued. And in my mind, it's like undervalued relative to what? It's not like a public, share price where you have earnings or you have cash flow and you're applying a multiple to it. And I think it's just crazy to me when people say, oh, I believe that this is going to increase in the long run. And like in my mind, it's relative to what? So In some ways, it doesn't surprise me. And I think along with crypto prices kind of going up, and we talked about the inverse correlation between crypto prices as well as NFTs, I think at the end of the day, it's, how much value am I really getting from this holding on to this NFT, right? So, I'm a Moonbird holder. I enjoy being a part of the community. I know it's worth, however much is worth today. But I guess in my mind, I still get that value out of it. But if at some point I feel like, hey, I'd rather have a couple of extra $1,000 in cash so I could buy myself a holiday, I would sell that JPEG, right? And I think at the end of the day, it's a trade-off between what people are realizing is important to them, whether it's community, whether it's events, or whatever else that the team is building, could be your actual product. And so people just have to, make that decision for themselves, and also realistically, how many communities can one really be a part of? And so, figuring out what their top 3 communities are at the end of the day.
I also think the Poopy stuff, I think the Poopy stuff is kind of ridiculous. I mean, people are mad because they see Doodles as treating their holders as somewhat hostile, broadly speaking, or they're sort of dismissive. And I know their style is a little like middle fingery. I think like the mobs coming at him for saying that they're not an NFT project, like, of course they're not. Like, duh. Like, they just acquired, like, they raised $50 million and acquired a like top tier animation studio. Like, clearly they're not a project, they're a business. And I think it's just like people wanting to choose the most ungenerous interpretation of that comment as possible because they're frustrated about other things, or they're frustrated because their bags are down. Randi, your take on sort of the market where we stand today right now, and then I want to get into some of the AI art stuff that's still doing well.
Definitely. And I think, a lot of founders in Web3 are a little bit caught in a tough place right now, because if you want to expand your business, you have to go outside of Web3 right now. Like you said, there's just not enough happening inside of Web3 to build a sustainable business on just those customers. So that's why I think you see Doodles and you see these other founders trying to start using language that feels better to the Web2 crowd. Like they're going to Hollywood, they're expanding beyond it. And like Debbie said, that in some ways, it pisses off the people that were there early who feel like they got in early. But in other ways, those people should want these projects and these businesses to expand and to bring in new audiences and to grow value. So, I saw this again, sorry to be the old person who keeps saying I saw this then, but I still remember when Facebook was only at a couple of colleges, and then we expanded to a few more, and everyone rebelled. All of the people at the original colleges were like, no, we thought it was just for us. And we're like, okay, but this is an actual business. So we need to actually have other audiences, not just 3 colleges. And there's always that push and pull as a founder in trying to make your original audience happy, but then also try to grow in a new direction.
It's the sellout challenge, right? It's the every artist who actually then makes it bigger than the original indie band that they were is now a sellout. And it's that's a tension that will exist forever in everything, entrepreneurial culture, et cetera.
I can just add one thing though. I feel like Debbie made a really great point that it's really hard to put a monetary value on how passionate people are about a brand. And it can be for example, my husband works at Peloton, and if I walk down the street with a Peloton shirt, people stop me in the street to be like, I just did my 2000th ride, or I love this coach. And but and then you look, and sometimes what's going on in the stock market with the company doesn't reflect that. And it's really hard to put a value on the sense of community and passion that people feel. And I think that's what's happening in Web3 a little too, is
you're saying the Peloton token price would be higher than its current share price. Peloton needs to issue a token. My sister-in-law also works there in finance. I'll make this recommendation.
Totally. We'll go full steam on them. But yeah, it's so hard to place a value on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that brand equity component. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's talk what has done well in the market, throughout the last however many months, I guess month, maybe call it, which is AI art really having its moment. You had that with Claire Silver. Obviously, there was some drama there, but you have just a number of artists from the Braindrops community that are doing well and some big sales. Debbie, I know you write a newsletter that really focuses on the creator experience, creator royalties, artists. How would you characterize this moment in time, either for AI art or broadly? Like, what are you seeing right now in terms of the creator community in NFTs and the royalty conversation?
Yeah, this is something that, Randi and I talk about all the time. Creators have been creating for a really long time. It's not that NFTs were brought to the market and somebody woke up one day being, oh, I'm going to be an artist now. Every single artist that I know, honestly, have been creating for, at least like 5 to 10 years. And now NFTs are just another revenue stream for them. It's just another way for them to express themselves, sometimes creatively, and obviously a new source of revenue for them. And I would say what has been really interesting has just been the evolution of technology and this real intersection of arts and technology. And not just from, being able to sell their work online and proof of ownership and authenticity and all of that, but also how technology is now a collaborative tool for a lot of these artists. We've spoken to tons of artists who were traditional illustrators and now incorporating AI into their practice. And so using AI as a co-collaborator. And I think it's been really interesting because in some ways, like someone also described it to us as kind of surrendering control, part of the control of the creative process to something else and not really knowing what you're going to get. And in that way, it's kind of magical. I find it really beautiful and when they describe it that way. And yeah, we've covered, a lot in this weekly newsletter that we put out, it's called Creative Royalties, tongue in cheek. But we've covered so many of these topics where it comes to, burning of NFTs to redeem for something else. And a lot of that is you're turning the collector into an active participant in your art creation process. And in the past, the collector was just passive, right? You just buy something and you put it on your wall, you have it, but you don't really interact with the rest of the artistic process anymore. And I think everything that we've been seeing over the past year, whether it's AI, or whether it's these burning mechanisms, have really shown that, an artist doesn't have to create in silos anymore. It can really do so in community of other people.
Yeah. One thing I'll add there, because Debbie is far more knowledgeable about the actual use of AI in the art creation. But what I will say is that so many of the artists we work with struggle in this space because to be a Web3 artist, you also need to be an entrepreneur and a marketer and run a community. You have 17 jobs. And this is really where AI plays a massive role for artists in now, the AI can help write a business plan for you. That might not be something that's intuitive for an artist. It can help write social media copy. It can help with a lot of the marketing that artists struggle with. So I think, even though there's a lot of debate going on about kind of provenance and AI and how to actually use it in the process, so many of the ancillary things I think are going to be very beneficial to creatives.
And it sounds like the artists you guys are speaking with are embracing it. I mean, you describe that surrender, but there's that sense of maybe this is an inevitability, and therefore I need to learn how to use it, as opposed to, I think if we look broadly, there are plenty of artists who have a lot of hesitations about this. And part of that is around copyright, and does an AI have the right to use my style, or does somebody have the right to be able to type into an AI, make this in the style of X artist, and that artist doesn't get any royalties? How much of that is a part of the conversations you guys were hearing, and how much are you talking to artists who are really we're going to go all in, we're going to lean into this AI thing because we don't think there's any stopping it?
I think a lot of the artists that we speak to are pretty open-minded about it. Obviously, it's not going to be right for everyone, just some collectors may not enjoy collecting AI art, and that's fine. I think art at the end of the day is completely subjective. But, what we have seen is that it does require skill to put in the right prompts. And obviously, you don't just put in one prompt and then whatever the AI returns, that's your piece, right? There is a lot of back and forth. And I've definitely seen AI art where I've probably tried keying in similar prompt, but don't get the same result. So I think there is real kind of taste and curation that is involved. The other stories that we've been hearing from AI, one of the artists from our community, she has, suffers from chronic fatigue syndrome. And so, hasn't really been able to create for the past few years. She's been bedridden for the past few years, but she's been a filmmaker for years. And the dawn of AI has really allowed her to be able to embrace that creative process once more. And so she's creating from her bed in a way that she hasn't been able to do so for the past few years. And I think stories like these are really inspirational to show that, first of all, AI is art. AI It's not something that just anybody, like if the three of us, if we had the same problem, we would come up with like three completely different pieces of work, right? Just because we have different tastes and different perspectives. But also, yeah, just leaning into it as a tool and then realizing what they want to take and what they don't want to take. And then I think understanding that at the end of the day, they have, full say over how they want to use it and incorporate it into their work.
I'll definitely say that in my discussions, writers are freaking out about the AI a lot more than artists are right now. As the art tools become more sophisticated, I'm sure that will become a bigger conversation. But we sort of even have to just back up, and it makes you think about, is AI creative? Like, is the AI an artist or not? What is art? Who is an artist? And I think that's it's forcing a lot of those big discussions on like exactly what it means to be creative or to be an artist.
I mean, to throw this back to your, I'll be the one now being like, well, back in the day, like, my understanding is when we first started painting on canvas as opposed to, church walls, people were like, that's not really art. Like, it feels like, again, this is anytime a new tool comes out, there's a suggestion that it's not legitimate art based on what we'd seen in the past. And this so feels like it'll in history fall in that category where like clearly to Debbie's point, like, if each one of us is coming out with something different using an AI tool, and it'll take time, and I feel like you're gonna have lots of people like questioning it and being like, this isn't real art, et cetera, and over time we'll all settle into accepting that it is.
I feel like I achieved the ultimate mom hack the other day because I used AI in two ways that made me feel really proud. First, I took a picture of what was in my refrigerator and generated recipes just from like the AI told me what to make.
Oh my gosh.
Based on a picture of what was in my refrigerator. So I was like, mom hack number one. Then the second thing I did, you guys, I asked it to write a bedtime story for my kids. Like I put in my kid's name and their interests, and it literally wrote a bedtime story that I then just like pretended I wrote and like read to them. And I was like,
did they like it?
Loved it. They loved it because it was like about them. And I was like, I nailed this mom thing. Thanks, ChatGPT.
That is amazing. I mean, I am underutilizing this, clearly. I already knew that, and then you've just really hit that home for me.
It's neither here nor there about Web3 or AI art, but I mean, even I feel like I'm so amateur hour in like learning about all of this that it's like you said, it's just we're in a revolution. It's very exciting. It's terrifying and exciting.
It's interesting too, because I've been hearing about AI. I feel like I've been tracking people who've been talking about AI for truly like 10 years now, and it's having its consumer moment finally. But to make this about Web3, like I feel similarly. I think it might be a long time until Web3 really has its consumer moment. And people want to pretend that Web3 is not going to happen because it's actually had so much time because Bitcoin was developed in 2008. NFTs really started last year. 2020, I get it. You had CryptoKitties in 2017, but it was so scant, people, in terms of like the people who are really thinking about this or observing this. And I think AI is now finally having its consumer moment after more than a decade, but I've been tracking it for a decade of people talking about it.
Decades.
Yes.
I mean, for decades we've had AI, and like for probably the last decade, all customer support that we deal with is AI, and just like it just hasn't been like front and center consumer interface.
Right. It's that consumer moment that is making people step back and go, oh my gosh, like in my daily life, I'm going to be applying this. Y'all know I love Ledger, the world leader in critical digital asset security. When you own crypto, what you actually own is a private key that gives you access to your coins. It is imperative that you keep this key safe, and Ledger wallets are the best way to do that. The Nano S Plus and Nano X Ledger wallets, paired with the Ledger Live app, give you the best way to start your crypto journey while maintaining full control over your digital assets. Send and sign your NFT transactions with full transparency in the Ledger Live app. what you see is what you sign. And y'all have heard me talk about Ledger Stacks before. Well, due to unprecedented demand, Ledger has received all the Ledger Stacks pre-orders that it can fulfill through summer 2023. And so they have decided to pause the pre-orders. Ledger is incredibly grateful for the community's support and is working hard to get current pre-orders out and ready to ship so that they can make even more Ledger Stacks to keep your digital assets secure. Sign up for the Ledger Stacks waitlist and be the first to know when Ledger Stacks are available again for pre-orders. But don't leave your digital assets susceptible to breach or hack in the meantime. Order your Nano S Plus or Nano X today by visiting shop.ledger.com or clicking the link in the show notes. Okay, let's move to this Balaji situation, which I understand you guys maybe haven't been following super closely. Debbie, it sounds like you've been tracking a little bit. I've been obsessed with this. I'm like listening to Balaji on everything.
You have to catch me up. You have to catch me up. I'm going to learn through you. Okay.
I'm not going to get perfect dates here. Balaji tweets, basically Balaji accepts a bet that somebody puts to him where he bets $1 million or like $1 million in Bitcoin that the US will enter hyperinflation in the next 90 days and that Bitcoin will hit $1 million over that time frame as well. So the bet itself, we were kind of talking about this beforehand, to me is sort of immaterial. Like you have a lot of critics coming at him being like, this is the stupidest bet ever. Like if you thought Bitcoin was going to hit $1 million, the right thing to do would be not to bet on it in the way that he's doing it, but rather just buy up a bunch of Bitcoin. And it's like, yeah, that's true. This bet is not intended to make him a bunch of money or make any financial sense for him. This bet is intended to draw attention to this thesis that he has. So I guess I'll start with I'll just give kind of the Balaji side and then maybe the critic side. So it's what's so interesting is that what's getting attention, and this is by his own design or fault or however you want to frame it, but is this idea of like the US is going to enter hyperinflation in 90 days and Bitcoin's going to hit $1 million. So you have a lot of people reacting to that and critics of his reacting to that being like, that's ridiculous. And I have a lot of sympathy for that because I think there is a lot to that seems ridiculous. And I think these critics are looking at that and saying that is so ridiculous that something else must be going on, that Balaji must be doing something else here. And the conclusion that everyone seems to be coming to is like Balaji is trying to market manipulate. And the prevailing sentiment among Balaji's critics that I see, like Molly White, who's I think a very thoughtful and good critic of Web3 and a thoughtful and good critic of crypto. And she wrote a post debunking or denying that Bitcoin is pumping right now because it's a safe haven from banks. And I think there's some she makes some really legitimate points. Like, I don't think the only reason that Bitcoin is pumping is because people now don't trust banks at all. And so are funneling their money into Bitcoin. But as part of that, she also makes this criticism of Balaji, which is that he's just trying to market manipulate. And basically he's trying to like find exit liquidity. And he's trying to pump the price of Bitcoin so that he can make money because he holds a lot of Bitcoin. And that is like, I've been fascinated by this because I think I just don't buy that argument at all. And I don't know if these people, some of whom I really respect, like Matt Levine, just haven't been following Balaji enough to like know about him the way that I feel like I know about Balaji, which is like, I just don't see this as a person who is now trying to basically burn his entire reputation down by using his Twitter followers as exit liquidity for a Bitcoin pump. Like, unless this man is a secret gambler who has all sorts of debts that we don't know about, which is totally possible. Like, nothing about that argument makes any sense to me. What I think is going on is the hyperinflation stuff, the 90-day hyperinflation, the 90-day Bitcoin price is all engagement farming to get more attention. But to get attention to what is his core argument, which he's basically saying Silicon Valley Bank was just the tip of the iceberg. All US banks are insolvent. And I think that's essentially true, right? Like all these banks put a lot of money into treasury bonds. And then when interest rates were severely hiked, all of that is underwater if you were to market. He's shown some really interesting charts, how it's like, if you look at that have come out from like the Fed, like these aren't like charts he's making up that show the insolvency of banks relative to like the past 2 decades. And the only, 2008 was the only other time they were sort of insolvent. And this is like to a degree way higher. So he's saying the banks are insolvent to a level that he finds dangerous and like terrifying. The Fed is covering this up, and they're covering it up by printing ungodly sums of money. I mean, they're, going on a printing tear both to backstop the banks. And he would also make the argument that they're printing a ton of money in order to inflate away their debts because we're in so much debt. And if you're concerned about this situation at all, one place you might go is crypto. And he's saying, well, now they're trying to shut down all of the crypto on-off ramps. And they've shut down Silvergate. They're making it virtually impossible for Signature to bank crypto folks. And so not only have they created this situation of insolvency, they're also blocking the exits and making it so that you really can't get in or out via crypto. And then the kind of last piece of this is in 3 months or however many months, at some point this summer, it sounds like they're going to introduce a CBDC, which is some version of an answer to this whole situation that they've created, but will also give the government a tremendous amount of control and power and ability to blacklist and censor, because they now control the flows of money in a way that, you know, if you have cash, they don't know what you're doing with that cash. If you are only operating on a CBDC system, they know exactly what you spent money on, and they can do all sorts of blacklisting things. And so his argument is get your money into crypto now and get it like out of sort of centralized exchanges while you still can. Now, you can agree with that, disagree with that. Some of that is facts. Some of that is an interpretation, like whatever. But I really fall in the camp of, I believe that he believes this and that he is doing all of this and saying hyperinflation and trying to like kind of fearmonger for people to get this central point across. Now, you guys haven't been following this, so I don't know that you have a take, but I'd be curious on your like reactions to that thesis in general. And I don't know, any thoughts you have on sort of the way these mainstream narratives maybe do or don't really reflect what I think is going on under the surface in like our weird crypto world.
It's interesting. I wish I knew more about this exact situation to weigh in on, but one thing I will say though is that I sort of feel like this is a lose-lose moment for like the basic consumer, because a lot of what he's saying is true about the banking system and about the terrible situation that we're in, but I don't know that right now in the current incarnation that crypto is the answer. I don't think consumers win in a non-regulated, like terrifying space also where they're like scammed and hacked and their wallets are stolen. Like crypto is not safe enough for me to like recommend to my mom that she take money out of the banking system and put it into Bitcoin. And so like until we get to that like Web 2.7, consumers are stuck in just like two losing systems. And I don't know that like putting your money in a place where there's like no regulation and clicking on one link like loses everything is also the answer.
It's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would chime in that, yeah, you know, I think it's probably true that there are weaknesses in the banking system. And we've seen in the past, obviously, how there can be massive contagion. We're already seeing little bits of that. It's very easy for one bank to fail, leading to, you know, a whole other, you know, bunch of banks to follow suit. But I think the one maybe difference between now and kind of like 2008, again, kind of like talking about how long we've been around, is that these assets that the banks have been holding are not as kind of worthless or risky as those mortgage-backed securities back in 2008. Like at the end of the day, these are treasury bonds that, you know, that they will get paid out on. And it's really, you know, I think with everything that happened with Silicon Valley Bank, it was really an unfortunate kind of turn of events where, because of the world that we live in, because of Twitter, because of how easy it is to spread information, how easy it is to transfer money out, like compared to, you know, 20 years ago when you have to, I don't know, go to a physical bank to get your money out. I think that there are like differences in the situation. But yeah, you know, to Randy's point, you know, there probably are vulnerabilities in a banking system. I'm not calling this prediction. I'm not saying that, you know, he's right or wrong. But I guess maybe I'm a little bit more hopeful or optimistic that it's not going to be quite the disaster that he's predicting.
What do you make of the, for lack of a better term, fear-mongering he's doing around the US government trying to completely shut down on off-ramps to crypto? Because I think that's the piece to me that I feel, you know, and I'm in this space, so I don't want to be like overly paranoid, but like it definitely feels like regulators, and clearly there's specific examples that prove that regulators are like coming for this and coming for us. And that does concern me if you're somebody who does want like just diversification, let's call it, right? Like I'm not throwing all of my money into Bitcoin. Like I don't have enough money. Like I'm like, you know, I think this is all, I'm too poor for any of this to really apply to me. Like I think Balaji is speaking to a class of people that like have a lot of money they're looking to protect. And I'm like, the FDIC's got me covered, you know, like I'm pretty good. But I really value being able to hold crypto assets as well. And I do feel like there's a little bit of like, the cage doors are coming down and we're kind of stuck inside, and like I'm taking my money off exchanges, like, you know, not to be overly paranoid, but because I am nervous, and I do feel like this is something they're coming for. So I'm curious your thoughts on that. Maybe Randy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's definitely not the craziest thing that I've heard. And it does feel like there is kind of like a targeted crackdown on this space right now. So I think certainly anyone who holds a meaningful amount of crypto assets should be like really following the news very carefully.
Okay, last story, and then we're going to turn and talk about Hug, because I'm really excited to check in with you guys on everything that's going on there, is gaming NFTs having a moment. I mean, we've talked about, it's bearish, it's bullish, NFTs are all over the map, it's been kind of down these days, we're scared about regulators. One beacon of hope, no pun intended, because we're about to talk about Arbitrum, and Beacon is a big game on Arbitrum, is what feels like gaming on the precipice of really having its moment. And we've talked about this on the show and in the newsletter a couple weeks ago, when you had Mongrel, the major Fortnite gamer, sell his sewer key, or whatever it was, his Basey key for whatever that was, 2,000 ETH or 1,000 ETH, I guess. It was, a tremendous amount of money. You had Dr. Disrespect, who's a really big streamer, gamer, defending NFTs in games on Twitter. You've just had a number of those pieces of news that feel exciting. You have the fact that a lot of what we've been waiting for in, I think, call it blockchain gaming, are some really awesome, actually fun to play games. And those take a while to build. And so anybody who started building early, which would have meant like 2020 or, maybe like late 2020, 2023 is when we might start to have some of those actually fun games that have spent 2 or 3 years in development coming out. Whereas all the games we had previously, if they came out, they had been worked on for 6 months, and inevitably it meant there was just a financialization piece to it, and there wasn't like a real fun piece to it. So you have this moment where we think there's some really fun games that are ready to launch. And then I think on the tech side, there's been some really exciting news come out. And you've got the Arbitrum drop that's happened, and a lot of activity happening on Arbitrum. The Arbitrum drop is happening today. And then you have this recent announcement from Immutable and Polygon about ways that they're working together. And I was actually at GDC, the Game Developers Conference, with Immutable, with Polygon this weekend to moderate a conversation between Ryan Wyatt at Polygon and Robbie Ferguson at Immutable to talk about this partnership. So I want to get into some of these specifics, but I want to lay out that case for why I think gaming NFTs are really about to break through, and curious if y'all are tracking this at all or have thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I'm not a massive gamer, so, probably a little bit, out of what I pay a lot of attention to from a day-to-day basis. But, maybe, I guess, talking a little bit about some of the challenges that NFT gaming or Web3 gaming has had up to this point is that, I think while the financial aspect of it is definitely interesting and, suddenly makes sense on paper, I think a lot of the times adding that financial aspect creates stress. I think a lot of the times that gamers that are gaming, actually, that's not true. I do play Hogwarts Legacy. I've been playing a lot of Hogwarts Legacy for the past couple of months. But yeah, I'm playing it not because I'm hoping to, make a buck out of the adventure my character is going on or to sell all of these random items that I've got for real money. I'm playing it because it's a way to de-stress and it's a way for me to, just have fun. And so, a lot of the times I think the conversation that we've been having around Web3 gaming is that maybe gamers aren't really looking for the financial upside of it. And at the end of the day, for a game to be successful, it just has to be a really good game. And I think that's first and foremost what's the most important. So, I think at least that's kind of what I've been familiar with. Obviously, it's really heartening to see all of the developments that we've been seeing recently. And, I think in general, anything that furthers Web3 mass adoption, like you said, getting us to the consumer moment that we're all hoping for. And if gaming has to be a part of that, then, so be it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not much of a casual gamer myself, but I have 2 sons who are huge gamers. And the reason that what you're saying makes so much sense to me is that, my kids speak metaverse and Web3 as a first language, whereas, for me, it's learned. So, I could spend 2 hours trying to convince adults until I'm blue in the face that direct to avatar will be a line of a multi-billion-dollar industry one year. And they could just be sorry, no. And then I'll just walk downstairs where my kids are asking if they can have their allowance inside Roblox or inside Pokemon or some of these games because like they want to buy things for their avatar and buy things for events. And I was like, that's what I was just talking about for 2 hours to people who don't get it. And so it makes total sense to me that that's where we would be seeing like a breakthrough consumer moment.
Yeah. So I'll touch on a couple of the recent news here. Arbitrum, the long-awaited ARB airdrop. We talked about this a little bit on last week's show because it was announced last week. Today, as we record this, which is Thursday, the airdrop is actually underway. I think right before we recorded this, it's like 40% of the airdrop has been claimed. They're distributing 11% of the total ARB tokens in this initial airdrop. I know like the treasury ecosystem is making out very well in this. You have some like, call it that, almost like an app layer that's doing very well. I'm excited for this. I think I said this last week. Anytime you're putting liquidity into this system, I think it's a good thing. So as we talk about, like the market's down and people aren't buying NFTs, I'm hopeful this could revive a little bit of life into things. I think Arbitrum users, are a lot of DeFi users, not just NFT users. So unlike the Blur airdrop, which I think is basically injected straight into the NFT market, I think that this Arbitrum airdrop is probably going to be spread throughout DeFi a little bit more, not necessarily just spent on JPEGs, but is nevertheless exciting. And probably some of that goes to gaming assets because Arbitrum does have a decent gaming community. You have news like Pirate Nation, which is a game that's been building on Polygon. They're moving to Arbitrum Nova. So I think exciting things happening there, not just in terms of, okay, there's activity and that's great, but there's also an injection of liquidity happening that I think bodes well for everything. And then there's this Immutable Polygon news, which is essentially that Immutable is launching, I'm probably going to mess up language about this, which is especially pathetic because I was just with all of them this past weekend and I don't know if I'm using all their marketing language right, but you have Immutable launching essentially a new chain, which is an immutable ZK EVM. So it's fully compatible with the Ethereum virtual machine, and it gives Immutable the ability to write like full smart contracts as opposed to being an app specific rollup, which is what the Immutable chain has been up to this point. And so the way that Polygon and Immutable are positioning this, and I'm inclined to believe them, is like you have this best of both worlds where you're using Polygon's ZK EVM technology, which they have, which they would say is, best in class, whatever, debate that, but clearly is important. And then you have Immutable, which has done a lot of work on how do we make the best possible developer experience and like game developer experience. How do we build APIs that make it so you don't actually have to write in Solidity code, or like how do we make this as easy as possible for developers and for consumers? They've rolled out a product called Passport, which is to abstract away a bunch of the complications of playing games, like blockchain enabled games. And so you're bringing these two worlds together, the EVM layer, the ZK EVM layer of Polygon, the awesome developer experience of Immutable, and they're partnering together to really make this like the ultimate place to build games. And it seems like they're really targeting, I think, like big game studios and your Blizzard Activisions. Like if they're going to come on and build a blockchain game, they want it to be on this new Immutable ZK EVM, whereas Arbitrum I think is more focused on like the real degen-y stuff. But I'm just excited that you have both of these advancements, announcements coming out at the same time. Like I said, again, also against this backdrop where you're just having more energy around this in general, it feels like. So very optimistic.
Yeah, it's exciting. I have to admit that I did a whole podcast on this also. I've now heard you describe it, and I still am not 100% understanding what's going on. So I feel like I have to dive into it a little bit deeper. But I do think that, the general trend of like Web3 is this walled garden that you basically had to be a PhD to like do anything in. I love seeing all of these different facets of it becoming more and more accessible to new people coming in and new developers and people who are more hobbyists in the space. So I think all of these are fantastic trends to going more mainstream.
I want to turn to Hug and talk about what y'all are doing and building. First, give us the briefing on what Hug is. Randi, you've been on the podcast before, but it was a while back. Folks may not remember. So give us the TLDR on Hug, and then let's talk about what the most recent updates are.
Debbie, do you want to kick us off with that, and then I'll chime in? Because your colleagues listeners are sick of me by now.
No, never. We could never be sick of you. So in a nutshell, Hug is a social discovery platform for artists that's looking to get connected with collectors. So think of it kind of like a Yelp meets Etsy for artists. We are also really big on education because, like we've talked a lot today, the onboarding, there's so much more that can be done for onboarding people from Web2 into Web3. And so we also provide a number of education and advisory programs, whether that be cohort-based learning or, free accessible education through a weekly newsletter. But really our ethos is how can we support artists in becoming the creative entrepreneurs that we know that they are, and allowing and giving them the tools so that they can really focus on the things that they enjoy, which is art. And, we believe that a huge part of that is really building the connection between artist and collector.
Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, I think since the last time I was on this podcast, we've really evolved to being extremely artist and creator focused inside Hug. And to some extent, that's also a bit of a reflection of, where we want to play in this bear market. And as Web3 is evolving, is we've seen there's just a huge trend away from these big generative projects. Like you mentioned, people aren't valuing them as much anymore. But what people are still valuing and have always valued over time is art and a connection to creators and to the art itself. We still believe that Web3 provides an unprecedented way for collectors and creators to participate in that process, and for creators to take ownership of their work and of their collectors. And so, as Debbie mentioned, we have education, we have tools, we have a platform for discovery. We really want to be the place that creators and artists call home in Web3.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you call out like the art focus is really almost where the evolution of this has been. Because I do think when you came on, it was, and this is going to get me to a question, but it was still like a Yelp, but for all projects, right? So there was more probably PFP focus. But the other piece of this that I remember is it was decentralized in the sense that you were crowdsourcing, but also curating this board that would review these projects. So, there was a certain level of having to verify. It wasn't just like you could go on and bash a project because you had some personal vendetta or something. What is that process like in terms of reviewing artists' work, or how does that all play out?
Yeah, I'll give the basic overview, and then Debbie can just correct me on everything that I'm missing. But that's still a huge component. We never, there's so many things that are wrong with gallery systems for artists where one or two gatekeepers are making decisions about who gets displayed and who gets collected. So Debbie and I never want to be gatekeepers for artists. So all artists are voted in by the community onto the platform. It also means that an artist, when they get on our platform, they know they already have fans and people who are excited about them because the community voted them in and wanted them there. And we do still have a board that approves all reviews, so that you can graduate up to being a review approver. And so they really require still that thoughtfulness in how you review someone's art. So, okay, Debbie, now jump in with everything I'm
No,
missing.
that's 100% accurate. So yeah, any artist can apply. And, we have such a huge range of artists on the platform too. I was just curating actually kind of like a mini exhibit at NFT LA at one of the events. And it actually blew my mind how like every single artist that was featured was from a different country. So we had somebody from Hungary, we had someone from Indonesia. We obviously had artists from the United States. And it was actually that I just had this heartwarming moment where I realized that this is an area where we could really have global impact. But yeah, we are seeing artists from all ages apply, and it's our community that votes them in. And I think this comes from a belief that curation should be decentralized, it should be community driven. I think this is a great example of where you can really leverage the power of community to spotlight artists, and that has so much more impact than just what a certain individual has to say. And previously we did keep things pretty kind of token gated, like you had to hold on to an NFT if you wanted to write a review. But recently we now allow anybody to contribute their reviews, but we still use our community or work with our community to make sure that everything that is being submitted to the platform is in line with our values, that we're really supporting artists, celebrating artists, we don't tolerate any hateful language. So it's not really dissimilar, I guess, from the Reddit model. And, that has worked really well with, moderators stepping up and just making sure that the contributions that are there are, that we celebrate the most worthwhile contributions.
And you talk about this education piece. And when you were first describing this, one of the other pieces that feels maybe a little bit different than when you first came on the show, Randi, is this almost serving as a marketplace. And I'm curious if you actually sell works or if it's more just like Yelp where it's just information based, but where you're trying to connect artists to collectors, you say. And so are you doing any work around like targeting traditional art collectors and trying to get them to understand this and come on and appreciate digital art? Or are you really focused on matchmaking among people who are already looking for digital art and just helping them find the artists?
It's such a great question. And I feel like you intuitively picked up on the fact that like when the last time I was on the show, I thought what we were building was like Yelp, but really it's more like Etsy. Is really what we're building, because so many of our artists actually do have physical and digital goods that they're selling. They're across all of these platforms. So we've already introduced like a one-click button to commission original art from an artist. We realized that a lot of the artists in our communities were making money from commissions. We also realized that, a lot of the people that get attention in the Web3 space are the small handfuls of collections and artists that are like selling for millions of dollars. But the vast majority of artists just who exist in the world are just like, they're happy if they're selling $200 worth of art a month. And so we really felt like no one was serving the long tail of artists, that there were a lot of platforms that were really targeted to like high end and fine art. And there was like few artists getting all the attention. But what happens to the millions of artists that are out there who just want to sell that, a few pieces of art a month as a side hustle? So yes, I think for sure we are planning massive expansion outside of just Web3. Debbie, feel free.
I would just add that, I think for the past year, we've been really focused on building an audience on Twitter, which is kind of where crypto Twitter lives. I mean, as the name suggests. But this year, we've really been focusing our content and education efforts to go beyond Twitter. So, building out weekly email newsletters that are very education focused and really not too much about Hug. It's really just about how can someone keep up to date with all of the trends as it relates to digital art. And then also expanding our channels to Instagram, to LinkedIn, where, there may be a larger group of people that are less familiar with Web3, but are still very much into art and art collecting and are looking to learn more about NFTs and are curious about what NFTs have to offer. And we're really there to be that kind of first stop for them, that, for these artists and art lovers, and introducing them to Web3 and what it can do.
So where can folks go? I was looking, it's not hug.xyz. What is the website for folks who want to go and check this out and start learning about this?
Yeah, so thehug.xyz.
The Hug, that's why I messed it up. Okay. Thehug.xyz.
You're so close, and maybe one day we will also own hug.xyz. Right now it's The Hug.
You didn't want to spend 7 figures of your on a URL? Was that wasn't part of the plan? That wasn't on the roadmap? Yeah,
exactly.
Makes total sense.
Thehug.xyz. We also we have a Discord that people can join to start their journey as either an artist or a curator. We also have Hug Studios, which is our educational offerings. And we offer anything from like a really short 2-week boot camp for artists to get started minting a collection, all the way to like months of hand holding through building a business in Web3.
So cool. I mean, I love this, as we've all woken up to like art as maybe like the most intuitive value prop of NFTs, and just such a no-brainer. And again, when I just laugh when people are like NFTs are dead, and you're like, even if you just took that, that's clearly not true, right? Like clearly digital artists need a way to, or it's so valuable for them to be able to prove provenance, and it's a world that I know I think on the daily that I wish I understood better. And so I think this is an awesome service for folks. I know you also acquired Meta Angels like it was kind of a while ago now, but we haven't talked since then. I've talked a little bit to their team. But tell us about that.
Yes. So, wow, gosh, it was just in November, but it feels
oh my gosh,
like
it feels like it was like a long time ago. Like a lifetime has occurred since you guys did that.
Decades since November. But yeah, I think, first of all, when we ran the data, we had something like a 25% or 30% overlap where Hug holders also held a Meta Angel. So there was just like massive overlap in the community and in the values. Debbie and I met in the Meta Angels Discord. So like our origin story starts there. And what we realized is that we really wanted to bring on a strong, experienced product leader. We were kind of looking for that role on the executive team. And Alex, who is the CEO of Meta Angels, like that was her background in tech and Web2. She built a startup called The Muse that's incredibly successful, ran product there. And it just, in our conversations, it just kind of made sense to, instead of having these two fragmented communities with so much overlap, to combine and to join forces. And I almost wish that more communities inside the Web3 space would do that. I think too often, the gut instinct is like, let me open my own Discord. Let me, replicate all of these things that hundreds of other people are doing, even though there's like not enough buyers in the space for the ones that already exist. Let me launch something new. I think a lot of businesses and projects in the space would do much better with some consolidation.
I agree. It's also just fun. It makes I don't know, it makes our industry feel more real. We've got like acquisitions and mergers and like shit happening, and we're like a real industry where that stuff happens and we consolidate. And so I was like, I love all you guys. I was having dinner with Alex, who you just mentioned. I guess I don't know anymore. I thought you guys acquired them like 8 months ago, so I don't know what time is. I think I talked to her like a month ago, but it might have been like 2 weeks ago. I can't remember at this point. But really, I was so excited to hear that news when it happened, and it's cool to understand why that made sense. Yeah. Well, awesome. Anything else you think folks should know? Any artists that you just let on the platform or broadly that you're excited about that you want to shout out before we wrap here?
Yeah, Debbie, talk about our gallery that we're launching, like our real gallery.
Oh, that's right, in New York.
Yeah, like a real life building with art on the walls. I know.
Imagine that.
Shocking.
Yeah, we are super excited to team up with the team at Seaport to have an NFT gallery.
Guys, this is a 2-minute walk from my apartment. I know exactly where this is going to be.
No way.
Yes, let me know when it's opening, and I'm going to walk 2 minutes down the street from my apartment.
Incredible.
All right. Well, it opens officially April 12th. We're going to be there for 6 weeks. We get to showcase a bunch of our different artists. Like I said, I'm so excited that they come from all sorts of different backgrounds, different countries. And we are once again kind of leveraging the power of community to vote to decide which artists get featured on those beautiful digital screens. And we'll be kicking it off with an official opening on April 12th and, invite everybody to join us. And then, obviously, if you're an artist and you would like your very own Hug artist profile, you can just apply for one yourself on the hug.xyz. And likewise for collectors, find an artist, find a new artist. We add new artists every single day. So at the moment we are onboarding about 6 artists every single day. And so there are just so many great artists to be discovered, great art to find, to buy and collect. And yeah, this is just the beginning. We've got about 500 artists on the platform already. So, starting to grow that day by day and, really, really excited for what else we can bring to them.
I have a request. I have a product request. Yeah. I'm looking at the website and it's beautiful. I'm looking at some of the art that's on here. Okay, I'm getting married this year. And one of the things for our registry was we want art for our apartment. I would love to have a wedding registry tie-in where, I could register through Hug for folks to buy art on the platform for us.
That's an amazing idea. I feel like we should beta test with you and
done. Because it's kind of hard. Right now we just have to kind of set it up where we can accept cash. You know what I mean? It's tricky. We can't just plug it into somewhere. But if we could go on and shop for some art on Hug and then put it on our registry, it would be awesome.
It's an awesome idea. And you can even specify, you can be we picked these artists because they're women or they support this culture and things like that. And like people can also really appreciate the backstory.
Exactly. And learn about the art. That's the thing is like, it feels like, with registries, you feel, I don't know, you can feel, you're like, oh, thanks. I don't know. It's the whole thing is kind of funky, but the art thing feels so cool because you're supporting artists at the same time. It's like, this is a cool place to put your money. It's not just for me. It's sort of like a ecosystem broader thing. So
I love about working in this space is that I honestly, my whole life, I never even like considered collecting art because it just felt so elitist. It felt like something that was like so out of my league. And that like you have to go into a gallery and you have to know things about fine art and everything. And it wasn't until I got into Web3 and I realized like that it shouldn't be that way. Yeah. Art collecting shouldn't be elitist. It's for everyone and having that connection with those artists. So that's why this has been so exciting for me. And I think especially with this physical gallery we're opening, like it really changes an artist's life and career to be able to say that they were displayed in a gallery in New York City. Yeah. And so many, especially international artists, up and coming artists don't have that opportunity to have a gallery show. So we're excited to be combining more Web3 discovery and in real life experiences. And also everyone should sign up for Debbie's Creator Royalties newsletter. It is a brilliant newsletter. It's one of the only ones I read from start to finish every week. And it is the thing that keeps me in the know.
Send us the link and we'll put it in the show notes.
Awesome. We'll do that.
Love it. Thank you both so much for joining me. Thank you for the update. Thanks for everything you're doing for the space and for artists. Honestly, on behalf of the space, it's so needed and I'm so grateful. And I'm sure we'll have you back on in the future to give us the next iteration of updates.
And thank you, Carly. I feel like I got a whole education today in what's going on in the space. Also, we're like so heads down with the art that sometimes it's hard to keep up with everyring in like the other corners.
No, I know. I feel bad. I sprung some of this on you too. You guys got here and I was like, we're going to talk about gaming.
Bring it on. I need to learn more about these things. So thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. Well, we'll talk soon.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Carly.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.